Welcome to the Masters of Beautiful Achievements podcast, where we share the insights from inspiring masters about how the use of physics, biology, and green chemistry is shaping our future. It's all you need to know about innovation and better business models. The podcast is hosted by Alexander Prince, founder of Scope Matters. For more inspiring episodes, visit the Masters of Beautiful Achievements website. Today's episode is part of a special series where we look at microbes through a different lens. We will explore how life sciences, biotechnology, and environmental sciences are influencing how we look at our natural world. During this series, Alexander Princeton and Mark van Bemmel are curious to know what happens when we zoom out and look at microbes as important players in a much broader system. How does this different perspective influences on how we look at the role of microbes and viruses in the web of life? And what lessons can we draw from nature's logic into making our world more sustainable? Together with specialists in the field of virology, microbiology, and biochemistry, we go on a journey combining insights from various disciplines to learn about the essential questions we might have been overlooking. And who knows, we might discover one or two innovative applications along the way. This series is brought to you by Scope Matters, a systemic innovation agency from Rotterdam, the Netherlands. They accelerate business leaders through systemic innovation by merging ecological thinking with economic doing. Their system approach transforms and improves the business model of their clients by creating new opportunities, mitigating risks, and increasing cash flows, while at the same time eliminating waste and doing good. It is the space where systemic sustainable thinking meets circular innovation, because in the end all matter counts. Check out the website on www.scopematters.com. And Orvion, a young biotech company based in Stolwijk, the Netherlands. They study microorganisms and are developing their own DNA analyzing techniques, like for instance the Orvion U-Detect. They work on solutions to remove contaminants from ground, water or industrial processes more cheaply and permanently. Their services are available for water treatment, soil remediation, ecology and industry. Orvion believes nature can do a much better job. So please take a look on their website on www.orvion.nl. Welcome to this session, Microorganisms Through a Different Lens, which is hosted here at Venture Cafe in Rotterdam. Together with Mark, we are hosting this monthly session. And this is a podcast series run by the Masters of Beautiful Achievements, hosted by Alexander Princeton, the founder of Scope Matters, and Mark van Bemmel, CEO of Orvion. And during these series of explorative dialogues, we're going to look at our natural world from a completely different perspective. And we will try to discover how it impacts how we look at life sciences, biotechnology, and environmental science. And for each session, we'll invite a guest speaker, a specialist in his field, either virology, microbiology, or biochemistry, to investigate for this episode how bacteria will power the sustainable industrial revolution. What does nitrogen, calcium, and hydrogen have to do with it? Why and how do microorganisms do it? And what can we learn from microbes about their and even our own metabolic system? And today's special guest is Willy Verstraete from University of Gent. Welcome, Willy.
Welcome.
My name is Alexander Princeton, and with my company Scope Matters, we help companies to accelerate their innovation capacity by merging ecological thinking with economic doing. And we do this by applying natural sciences and systems thinking to develop innovative roadmaps, because in the end, all matter counts. And this is a good start for you, Willy, to introduce yourself to us.
I am born in 1946, so I'm a crocodile. I date from a time that microbiology was still in its infancy. I had the chance to go to the university, and I was intrigued by microbiology and bioengineering, both.
Okay.
I became an engineer, a bioengineer, and then I went to Cornell University for a PhD. And there I was confronted with the concept of ecology, microbial ecology. my professor was there, Martin Alexander, and he was the first in microbial ecology. I returned then to Gent, and ever since I have been working on that concept of microbial collaboration, things that microorganisms, by working together, achieve, which otherwise would not be achievable. And that in a variety of situations, ranging from nature to industrial reactors. I have a career, my career was at the University of Ghent. I'm since 10 years that I am what we call pensioned, but I continue to collaborate through a number of spin-offs that were created by the university from our lab. And I am also still quite active in our Academy of Science.
Perfect. Thank you, Willy. And we're going to dive into a lot of topics you've been working on. So we're going on a roller coaster. That is at least what I've discovered from that research. Mark, your turn.
Yeah, I'm Mark van Bemmel. I'm 46 years old, father of 4 boys, and I studied environmental technology in Wageningen University. And from that time, I've been working on with microbes every day to clean up soil and to treat water. And yeah, we have a molecular lab in our company, Orvion, where we study microorganisms in detail based on DNA techniques. And I'm very keen to hear about Willy's view on the future of microbiology. So yeah, excited to have you here. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Willy, then we're going to kick off, and I had some time to figure out what the first question will be I should ask you. And it's going to be this one. What is at the basics of microbial resource management? What is this about, and what keys does it hold for us?
I can, let me start a bit trivial. You talk to people and you say, I'm an engineer. Oh, that's very good. You say, I am a microbiologist. This was much less appealing. And the reason for this is, of course, that people cannot see the implementations and the practicality of that. And there are many, many, many. So teaching students, you have to prepare them, and you kind of want to weapon them so that they can find a job. But if they say, look, we are microbial specialized engineers, that doesn't sound so good. So at a given moment, I was thinking, how can we make that a little bit more sexy? And we all know that human resource management is a quite important story. So if you now say that microbes are have lots of different talents, and by bringing them together, they can do much more than just alone, it still doesn't speak. But if you say, look, there is human resource management, and there is also microbial resource management, immediately everybody understands you now. And immediately the value of your let's say, knowledge becomes at a higher level. So speaking to an audience and you say, we deal with microbial ecology, with microbiomes, etc., they all start looking the other way around. But if you say, we talk about microbial resource management, then they are intrigued. That's my experience, and that's the origin. At one moment, speaking to a large audience, it just jumped to mind that I should translate what they know in a reflection to what I wanted to present.
Oh, Mark, this is completely in your alley.
Absolutely is. I think we're both very fascinated by the diversity of bacterial resources, isn't it? I think we're only starting to getting to know it a little bit, but the diversity on Earth is for a big part bacterial. So there's a lot of processes that bacteria can do, and
the key point of my story is, you have to convince people that bacteria work like people work. They work in teams. If I am a Robinson Crusoe, I might be able to grow some plants and to grow some foods and to dig a little this and that, but I might be very poor if I have to weave clothes and if I have to do many other things. For that, in our society, we all have specialists, and by exchanging that specialty, by complementing each other with our talents, we can achieve much more than that a single person can achieve, because that knowledge base is limited. This is thus the more true for bacteria. Bacteria have small brains. Their DNA is much smaller than ours, so they must help one another. And that concept that a single bacterium, of course, can do a lot, but also leaves a lot that is not so well done, and that can be complemented by other bacteria, that is the concept of microbial resource management.
If you talk with biochemists, they all prefer monocultures because that's easier to control and as growth medium, and mixed cultures seems to be the opposite of that.
Well, there is the story, let me turn to practice. Indeed, microbiology developed by unraveling, by taking one bacterium on the side, putting it in a test tube, and then studying it. The mix that was there out in the soil when I was a youngster, there was nothing much more, let's say, unpractical than to work with a contaminated culture. That was horrible. You had to have a pure culture, pure. But the moment that another bacterium was still there, you were clumsy. No, the idea gradually arrived that for a number of processes, and the most beautiful example of that is wastewater treatment. If you try to do that with one single culture, that one single culture has not the capacity to do a lot. It takes maybe one component and breaks it down. And that's it. And even it breaks it down incompletely. It has all kinds of side products. But you let a mixed group, you let a team of organisms do this, and they achieve the complete removal of everything that you offer to them. They really empty the whole system. So the combination of all those bacteria, each with their specific talent, working cooperatively in a team, that's the concept that we particularly have learned to admire and use in our society in wastewater treatment. Now, the economists have, at a given moment, tried to look into that. There are papers that say, what is the efficiency of a single organism that becomes a mega? We construct it, we put in all kinds of genes so that it becomes a single organism, but with mega capacity. We will make a, let's say, a horse with 5 legs, an elephant who can run as fast as a horse, something like that. The whole story is that this is very complicated because the regulation that then has to happen is the limiting factor. But if you allow a number of organisms, each with their specificity, to do a single job, usually that regulation of that, that coordination of that works very well. So in economical terms, one has calculated that indeed a mixed culture can achieve much higher efficiency than single cultures or combinations of single cultures. However, your point is very right, that there are then a lot of people that say, but a mixed culture, that is, let's call it chaotic. You never know what you have in your hands. Today it's this and tomorrow it's that. We published a paper on that because we feel that there is a very strong movement, and I am carefully to place it. There is a strong movement in society, in thinking, that indeed mixed cultures are worthless. They are chaotic. Yeah. They are full of entropy. They are full of chaos. You cannot control them, and that's not true. We published recently a paper on that, showing that indeed mixed cultures can be steered, can be controlled, and can be performing very, very stable. A good example is the wastewater treatment, but there are many other examples.
What's interesting about this, really, we do quite a lot of work on the biodiversity measurements by whole genome sequencing. So getting all the DNA of all your bacteria out in the wastewater treatment plant, that actually the population can shift without losing any kind of capacity. So yeah, there is some kind of a control mechanism apparently that keeps the capacity alive.
And Willy, you mentioned the sort of Darwinism-based niche assembly concept.
Say it again, if I may. I didn't understand it.
The Darwin-based niche assembly concept. It's a different Darwinism in bacteria flora. It's not.
It's again the survival of the fittest. The fact is that bacteria constantly adapt. So there is nothing in the environment, in nature, everything changes. And bacteria have the capacity to constantly adapt. And the more they are, the more diverse, the better that adaptation occurs. That's the whole story. They are capable to move along as the situation evolves, and that is that's why our sewage treatment plants, our drinking water plants, the soil, the rhizosphere of a plant, all of that is in constant evolvement in which the bacteria, the teams of organisms which are there, constantly adapt. But people think that this is all chaos and that you cannot trust it and that you have no grips on it. And the most delicate part of that I have experienced, but maybe that comes at a later stage to more detail. We are now talking about producing single cell protein. Mm-hmm. So you take a side stream from an industry. It's potato starch, to say one thing. This is relatively clean. It comes from the factory. It's starch. And then you can say one bacterium has to now upgrade this to microbial protein.
Which is the classical way of looking at it.
Yeah, or two, or three, but not more. Well, it becomes delicate. They will suffer, they will degenerate at a given moment. They will not be constantly evolving to optimal capacity. You let a selection, I'm not saying that you have to not control it, but you let a limited selection, 10, 20, do the job. You will see that some go up and some go down. I call this democracy. Every election you see some parties go up a little bit and win, and then in the next phase they overdo it a little bit so that others then compensate again. That's what you have also. It's a democratic system in which eventually the overall wisdom of the system prevails. And we must try to make sure that the public understands that this is not dangerous, that is natural, and it's the best of efficiency that you can get.
But does it produce any toxins or waste streams when you want to use this single cell for a feedstock?
You have to control everything. If you fly an airplane, you have to make your checkups. You have to control. Don't believe in simplicity. You have to make sure there should be no pathogens at a given moment, should be no toxins. You have to constantly control, just like you ride your car. Your car has to, at a regular moment, to have a critical inspection. There is no guarantee for absolute guarantee. But what I'm saying is mixed cultures are perfect and suited and can be controlled to deliver good products, and there are plenty of them. The drinking water that is biologically produced is full of bacteria. There are 10 to the 5th bacterium in every milliliter of drinking water, certainly in the Netherlands where they don't chlorinate the water. And nothing, we live with that. It's perfect. It's good for our health.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
if drinking water now would have to go to the European agency, EFSA, and be submitted to a critical examination, they would never agree that drinking water is distributed and that it can be drunk by people, because it's full it contains its intrinsic
Yeah,
microbial community.
but then it raises the question: what would that business model be for the water bottling companies?
The business model is that if you drink natural water, non-chlorinated water, it's full of bacteria.
But also the ones from the bottles you buy in the supermarket.
Right. There are you can Mark can do his. We did once the first time I did DGE. The pattern to characterize bacteria was on different drinking waters. I was so startled that I could differentiate now all those different drinking waters in the supermarket based on the molecular biology of the live bacteria which are there.
Yeah. That raises an interesting question.
The point of concern for drinking water is mainly that you don't get contact with fecal organisms from fecal origins. So
no,
that's one of the main things.
But they come from in the Netherlands, the Rhine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's surface water, the birds shit in it, are contaminated with fecal material, yet it is at a limit and it is under control, and it is particularly under control by the microbiology itself. We speak about biostability, and that means that the existing microbial community controls what comes in, gives no place, gives no niche to grow to unwanted organisms. Not that they are not mentally involved, but they say, we occupy what is possible here, and we don't let other organisms come in.
And of course, then the conditions are very important. So the conditions for the transportation of the drinking water and so on should be okay for a stable.
Absolutely, and that's very clear.
Yeah. So yes, we can be more positive about bacteria than the general public.
But at this moment, we must admit that we live in a very bad time. A virus, next to it comes a bacterium. It's conceived as negative, very negative, and we will suffer for that. There is a journal called Microbial Biotech, and at a given moment, a number of people have sent in articles there about how can we make the public as a whole, more positive in their thinking patterns about microorganisms. And there the word came forward, microbiophobia. People being afraid of microorganisms, like they are afraid of all kinds of spins and things like that. So they are, at a given moment, that concept of microbiophobia. How can we decrease that and demonstrate that microorganisms are very positive in the food, in our environment, on our skin, in the air, all of that. But I was very hopeful that we would turn this around, particularly by this concept of microbiome in our gut, through which we digest our food and get vitamins and get immunity. But these days with COVID are not very helpful. People get more and more constantly, let's say, bombarded with messages that microorganisms, and that means microbiologists, are there on the first scene of the one speaks about virologists, microbiologists, as now the generals in the defense. Right. So microorganisms and viruses are now associated both as being negative only.
Right,
negative.
And we have to wash our hands constantly with ethanol and so on, which is not so good for our natural flora of bacteria, of course, on your hands and on your skin. And there's also a lot of negative effects probably in there. I don't know how you think about it, but how could we turn this around a little bit? We have to bring out the good news about bacteria, isn't it?
Well, I think the most important thing is to demonstrate that there are a number of processes where microorganisms are very much our partners in health, our partners in environmental maintenance, We call this also ecosystem services, our partners in certain important processes to maintain, even to improve to the climate that we have, microorganisms and climate. One of the things that we have been working on is bacteria, which take hydrogen, oxygen, and CO2. And they combine this and make biomass. We call this in German Knallgas bacteria, because if you take hydrogen and oxygen and you put a spark, you have a boom. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's the Knallgas. It gives a boom. But the bacteria bring hydrogen and oxygen together, and then they take CO2, just like a plant takes the energy here, which is in the hydrogen. They use it to grow their cells, and they make nice, very nutritious protein, cell biomass. So we have been working for the last years on that idea of those hydrogenotrophic, hydrogen-trophic growth on hydrogen and CO2 capture through that process to biomass. And this biomass now, if we do that properly, can really make a difference in that climate change. We can accelerate through a biological system to capture CO2 and have a microbial component to the climate abatement, the climate change abatement. And that is very important. I have tried to emphasize that already, and slowly but surely we get ears in listening.
Willy, how is that relating to the technology of LanzaTech?
Wait a moment, that's a good question. LanzaTech says, okay, let's take syngas, but the syngas comes from coal. That's still fossil fuel, right?
Yeah.
So they take coal, make syngas, and the syngas, the CO and the hydrogen, which is there, the carbon monoxide, in a pressure reactor, they produce then ethanol, and the ethanol is then for mobility.
Yeah, one of the things, they produce 50 different biochemicals, and they started off with biofuels.
But it's mainly, LanzaTech is mainly geared here in Gent, where I am. They will put on a plant which produces bioethanol. It's ethanol from biological origin from syngas.
But but you can burn ethanol again, and then you have a fuel again.
If you burn the ethanol, it's your fuel in your car, and you then drive your car on ethanol, which comes from coal. That is the story. That's the LanzaTech story. My story is different. I take just green electricity, photovoltaic panels. You put them where there is sun, and we see them all over our places now, or you take green electricity from windmills, and you use that to electrolyze water. So you split the water in hydrogen and oxygen. So the energy, which is green from the sun, from the wind, is now in the hydrogen and the oxygen, which are separated. If I now put them together and I give a spark, I can run, I have energy on it. This could be also possible. But what we do is, we say we use this green energy, hydrogen, and we bring now this in contact with CO2, and I grow not ethanol, I do not produce in my reactor ethanol, I produce biomass. You can compare it with yeast that you ferment. You grow something that out of my reactor comes a kind of yogurt, and this yogurt you can consume. It's a very nutritious protein, but it is a protein based on the CO2 from the air. It's just like what plants do, but here the energy to achieve the CO2 transformation comes through either the wind or the sun, which empower my electrolyzer.
Sorry, can I ask a question first, Alexander? You mind? Proteins are rich in nitrogen, isn't it? So where do they take the nitrogen from, Willy?
Good question. I need some nitrogen, I need some phosphorus, I need some minerals. In the limit, but now I'm overdoing it, but I'll be frank. In the limit, I can just bring in nitrogen from air and they will fix the nitrogen. But then my process is not, you know that bacteria can fix nitrogen.
Rhizobia, yeah.
Yeah, but also there are lots of free-living bacteria who, Azotobacter, etc. They can fix nitrogen. So there has been work here at the University of Gent by my colleague Nico Boon.
Yeah, I know him.
Nico has been working on bacteria that fix nitrogen and grow on hydrogen and oxygen. So the nitrogen is not the issue. But let me be very frank. If I look as an engineer to processes, I know that biology there is not, in nitrogen fixing, is not so super good. If you do this in the chemistry on 800 degrees and a certain pressure, your overall energy efficiency is much higher. So I use the nitrogen produced from a normal fertilizer.
Nitrogen. Yeah, so ammonia.
Yeah, ammonia or nitrate, they can both. But that is because then my reactor efficiency or my overall LCA, my life cycle assessment combination becomes better, even when I use fertilizer. But the main difference is the following. If a farmer uses nitrogen, he brings it on the land, it rains, it leaches, there is runoff. He has an efficiency even in the Netherlands, where they have Wageningen and centuries of studies on how to improve the efficiency. The efficiency is in the order of, through all these uncertainties of the climate, and it becomes even worse, is of the order of 50-60%. In developing countries, it's 20-30%.
Yeah.
I put nitrogen in my reactor, and Mark, you can understand it. When I put it in the reactor,
you use it all. Yes.
I don't give any more before they have used it all. So exactly. I have 100% or 80-90% efficiency of nitrogen. That's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and actually, this is quite an important problem now in Holland, because the ammonia going into the air from feedstocks and so on it's becoming a bigger problem by the day.
But by the way, I mean, I know that Protix, the insect black soldier fly farmer in Bergen op Zoom, they have a ammonia issue, and the only thing they can do is to have really expensive air scrubbers, but they should put it in your process.
We are busy with that. We have a system here in Belgium which takes the air scrubbers from all kinds of farms, piggery farms, chicken farms, and then this nitrogen is transferred into the water, and this nitrogen water, that captured nitrogen, is then upgraded to microbial protein through the process I come to say. So you use recovered nitrogen and you upgrade it with green energy and CO2 to microbial protein.
So really, you're actually saying the Dutch have a shit and a pea abundance. We have an abundance of hydrolyzers. Everything is being put in the north of the Netherlands, but we should put all our shit towards these hydrolyzers, put the bacteria in, and we have a factory running.
Let us be very careful. It doesn't work all that simple. First of all, if you want to make my process, the process that I'm talking about, if you put in clean material in, then you have high quality which comes out. So if I take hydrogen, I take water, I electrolyze the water with good hydrogen, with good electricity, I mean clean water, and I had hydrogen and oxygen. I take clean CO2, I can make feed and food grade protein. The moment I start putting in recovery nitrogen, recovery phosphorus, it becomes not the top quality anymore, but really, I can make then organic fertilizer.
Really, for those who doesn't know, what is that type of what was it you mentioned? the type of nitrogen and phosphate?
I can take recovery nitrogen.
Yeah, what is recovered?
That's what Mark is saying, that stripped, that ammonia which you strip from stables, which you strip from the black fly, soldier fly, that is, I call recovered nitrogen that you strip in the sewage treatment plant out of the sewers, out of the sewage or the digestive. I take the recovered nitrogen, I upgrade it, but because it's recovered, it might not be the top quality, there might be something to it. So then I don't make feed or food, but then I make what I call organic fertilizer. What is the story about organic fertilizer? Well, if you use the mineral fertilizer, and this is usually very soluble, it can run off, it can denitrify, it can leach. If you use organic fertilizer, and think of farmyard manure, but that's no longer possible, but think of what we say bone meal or feather meal or blood meal, these were the organic fertilizers. And if a farmer uses organic fertilizer, organic nitrogen, he knows that this is slow release. It only releases as the plant grows. So this nitrogen is not so much giving the issues that you have in the Netherlands about nitrogen. It is that you dose it, and as the plant grows, it continues. It does not give so many environmental problems. It has a value which is 5 times that of mineral nitrogen, simply because its environmental impact is lower and its growth effect is better.
And then I understand.
Actually, it's sort of the same biomass then that you grow with your hydrogen oxidizing bacteria, isn't it?
So I just differentiate different levels. If the input is top quality, then the output is top quality, and then you go for the food or the feed, which is these days very similar. One cannot give poor quality nutrition to animals, because these animals are then also consumed by the humans. So food and feed, top quality. Top in is top out. But if it's a little bit less, if there could be a fecal contamination or whatever around the system because you use a certain amount of inputs, which could have at a given moment some level of fecal contamination, then you make organic fertilizer. And we have been looking into that. We have been said, but if I now would make, it's a very interesting calculation. If you now would change all the mineral fertilizer by organic fertilizer, the organic matter content of the soil would increase, and you would have a good efficiency, you would have lower environmental impact. But all of that, there is no, we cannot produce organic fertilizer these days anymore, because the former production was farmyard manure. But we don't do this anymore. We don't put all that straw mixed with fecal matter and let it then become microbial. Farmyard manure is actually old, dead microbial biomass. These are corpses of bacteria.
Yeah.
And my factory, taking this recovery nitrogen, taking this green energy, can now make in a new way dead bacteria. You grow them and then you give them a pasteurization, and you have dead microbial biomass at the end, which you then bring as a slow release fertilizer into the environment.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it sounds very much similar, like using bokashi and activated carbon in your manure of your cows. I mean,
all of that is possible, but I think, a bit more pragmatic. Because the biochar and that's all a little bit farther. We have been calculating, is it possible? What would be, it could be in terms of costs, it could be possible. Yeah. It could be a good replacement of the bone meal, of the feather meal, and of the blood meal that people are now still looking for, but which will become less and less available in the future. So I think it is realistic. It is a more expensive form of nitrogen than the mineral nitrogen, but you don't have all those disadvantages, the disadvantages which give in the Netherlands this problem of nitrogen excess, which now kind of squeezes your society and your farmers to a major extent.
And of course, you combine it with CO2 capture, which is interesting as well.
That's the good point.
Yeah.
And you build up in your soils organic matter. And that organic matter makes you a soil which is much more stable, which is less sensitive to erosion. And all of that is comes at the cost, which I have to speak in 2 words. We have been calculating what this would cost if we would do that. And let me put it very straightforward. You come to something that it would cost per inhabitant, calculated over the whole world, something like €300 per inhabitant per year. Of course, that's a lot of money. It's very clear that you never will have the whole world being willing to pay €300. And then for the more industrialized countries, it would mean that they have to pay more per inhabitant. But that said, I can say, wait a moment. If it would be €30,000 or 3,000, but it is 300. 300 is not that far from the reality. 300, if we start calculating all those other alternatives of taking, you are in Rotterdam there, if there has been calculations on taking CO2 and burying it deep under the earth.
Yeah,
we have the Paris agreements, and they would do this, and that to decrease the CO2. They would use a lot of CO2 to make chemicals. They would use the CO2 from the stacks and bring it and use it to win fossil fuel by injecting it deep in the soil. All of that is double zero. I am saying we have a biological process which can produce food, feed, fertilizer, and also I can use that same microbial biomass which is produced and use it to make biodegradable plastics. You can take that biomass, bring it, link it into a polymer, and have a biodegradable plastic. We work together with the Swedish university, and we see that this is possible. So
but it's PHA?
No. So it's not PHA, it's not PHB. That story is a difficult one. The story of, I say you can fill a cathedral with all the papers which have been published about biodegradable plastics made from PHA and PHB. And there will become 10 cathedrals more of that. And the first PHA plastic has not been produced yet. My story is different. I say, what is the problem with PHA? Yeah, or PHB. This is a polymer made by bacteria. It's a beautiful polymer, but it is too expensive, and we don't succeed to make it less expensive. It's still up. You have to extract it out of that organism. You have to bring it into the production process, in the molding process at high temperatures. And the story is that you are 10 times more expensive than the common petrochemical-based
fossil fuel-based
unit product. My story is I make this microbial protein at a price, at a cost, which is of the order of €1, €1.50 per kilo, and hence it is competitive with the other basic products, the monomers which they use to produce.
What kind of polymer do you have then? Is it protein based?
It's just protein. People have been looking at protein, but look, the protein plastics that they tried to produce were based, for instance, on protein from dairy.
Yeah, milk. Yeah.
My goodness, what a chain! Grass, the cow, milk, and then that protein. This is a tremendous expensive protein with a tremendous cost to the environment. The same story, you can do it also from starch, gluten. I have nothing against this, but this is a very long chain. My story is I take the CO2, I take green energy, and I make biomass straight away in a reactor, and that protein can immediately go into plastics.
Right, and you capture CO2 again. Yeah.
And I capture CO2 straight in. Yeah, they are also captured when you make grain, when you make milk.
Oh.
And you can also say that this is green, but it's a very long chain.
Willy, can you do it anywhere on Earth? Can you also use it as a soil restoration in the Sahara or whatever?
You bring me to the critical point. My story is based on one thing. I need electrolysis. I need to take water, put in 2 electrodes at 4 volts, and then this electrolyzes the water.
Yeah, but Willy, they figured out you can do it with ceramics. 10 times cheaper than the electrolysis.
But I stay with the knowledge I have. That's not my field. They say, look, if you take the electricity, the electrolysis can be done with an efficiency conversion of the energy and the electricity to the energy and the hydrogen with 70%. That's good. But that means that everything that follows is based on the price of the electricity. And that electricity is now the key point. And the question is, how expensive is electricity and how expensive, what will be the evolution? And you come to the deserts. So the story is that we could, it's not my story, it's the concept at the University of Delft, that basically you could build in these deserts. And now I come to the major point. 10% of all the deserts in the world suffice, if you put their photovoltaics, to produce all the electricity that we need in the world. Mm. Come on. If we produce there that electricity, and that electricity is then actually used to make hydrogen, then that hydrogen is then used to produce protein. The key question is, what is the cost of that electricity? And at this moment, I think that if we can hope that this will continue to go down, this opens all the perspectives. We are really
I also think that if you can restore the soils that are eroded, and that have an eroded soil takes up, of course, 0 CO2. But as soon as you revitalize it, then you get growth of plants, of all kinds of other organisms, which would also capture carbon again. So if you understand, if you can restore that kind of eroded soils, it adds up all the time because nature is restoring them.
I want to add on it, and then Willy can respond. Yeah. This sounds so much like terraforming you see in the science fiction movies, where they send something to a desolate planet and suddenly everything lives. If I use your analogy, Willy, you only need a microbial flora, you need nitrogen, hydrogen, and some trace minerals. Mm-hmm. You put it in a container, you shoot it to a desolated planet, and suddenly you will have biomass and fertilizer.
It will need some good, clean thinking. You have to do good engineering because you bring hydrogen and oxygen and CO2 and it shouldn't explode, right? So you need a reactor technology in which you dissolve the hydrogen. You should select a good bacteria. You should, if possible, select not one, but a bacterium with at least maybe 2 or 3 what I call helpers, because to make some vitamin, to add, to clean up some other. So there is it's not all that, it's not so simplistic, but it is feasible. It is the basis of, let's say, a sustainable way of producing protein. We know now, at this moment that making protein is tremendously weighing on our footstep on our planet.
Yeah.
The protein, even if you grow leguminous plants which fix their own nitrogen, even then they use some fertilizer. Even that consumes a lot of fuel for tractors.
Yeah.
we have been calculating about that, and our way of producing microbial protein through the hydrogenotrophic bacteria is the only, and it's all published. We have publications if people are interested to that. It's all in good journals. It's the only way to make green protein. That means protein which has a positive, which captures CO2 without emitting CO2 through all the processes. So it's a real nice story. The key feature is number one. There are a number of features. One, the electricity that you use to do it must become less than 50 euro per megawatt hour. That is the story. They have the value. Secondly, your technology must be well done, because you need a reactor technology in which you bring things together which could explode. So the last thing that we need is that at a given moment some of these reactors explode and there are deaths and things like that. That is my second. It must be done in a safe and careful and well-engineered way. Third, we must make sure that the product that comes out, and you have said it previously, the product that comes out, we should not allow this blindly to occur. We must control it. There should be no pathogens. There should be no allergens. It should have a high, we should be able to resorb it in our gut system. But all of that is pretty doable, but it needs a good let's say, control. And finally, and that's the most important one, finally, we should convince the consumer. So let me be very careful there. Do we consume, is the consumer already convinced that he can eat microbes? If he eats yogurt, if he eats beer, if he eats many of those products, he is eating, consuming, we know that, but the consumer doesn't know that. So we have to educate the consumer and say, look, it's healthy for you to consume microbial biomass. It is there, it has always been there. Whenever you eat slaw, raw, green fruits and things like that, on the surface, it's full of bacteria. So please, believe me, there is nothing wrong in doing so. Still, the consumer will say, hey, these are now 100% bacteria that I am eating, while in something like in cheese or in dairy, there is still a majority of other things. So we still have to educate the consumer.
I don't think even we have to educate the consumer. It's those who do not want these products in the shelves who block it. I speak to a lot of food innovators, and the novel food law from the European Union is benefiting the old industry.
Definitely.
And to do something which is good for humans is a tremendous legislation challenge.
I agree, but the legislator, I agree, EFSA and the way and the dossier about novel foods, well, let's call a spade a spade. If the Brexit occurs, what you will see is that in England they will pretty soon reduce all that complexity, and they will produce novel foods there.
Interesting.
That's one of the elements that is called level playing field. They will reduce some of that, let's call it overcharged complexity. And they will say, we go to the simplicity, we go back to the bench, and we say that and that and that, and it must be the dossier instead of 20 millions. Now, novel foods are considered like pharma products. You need 20 millions to get a novel food, and that is too much. Yeah. So, if either then EFSA will have to reconsider its approach, or it will set all the European industries block. Because others in the UK or in Singapore or whatever, they will produce these materials. And so I think technically, sooner or later, these novel foods will come through. But I have more concern about the psychology of the consumer. When it comes to food, we are very conservative. Look, I put in front of you, you go to another country, and you have there something to eat and you have never heard of, and yeah, we are all very conservative.
Wat de boer niet kent, dat lust hij niet. Ja.
Yeah, but you don't know, you won't try
Yeah.
it. This is something of a safety measure, and that the only way to overcome that is education.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the Dutch have the word de schijf van 5.
Yeah.
And I know Lancelot Eat has produced a report saying that we can feed 10 billion people, and in there is more like the diet is changed. I'm still missing the fungi, I'm still missing the algae, I'm still missing the bacteria in the whole diet, but we're getting there slowly.
And what you maybe also need really is just a very good product that tastes good. That's
Yeah.
But for that we have engineers, food engineers, technologists. I have no worry. They will make. We have cooks who will turn something to something beautiful. That is not my worry. You have. It's clear that you have to do that, but you have to speak straight. You cannot. We eat mushrooms. If you would invent this now today, a mushroom, and say, look, I take chicken shit, yeah, and horse manure, and I mix this, and I grow them, and it's only 1 centimeter distance, but I grow there mycelium, that its other part of the mycelium is in the shit, and here at 1 centimeter above the shit, I take this and I consume this. Often raw. I eat mushrooms fresh. It has another taste. So you eat raw mushrooms, basically, and we do this, and this is quite accepted, and it's quite normal. But that's education. We have seen this.
But Willy, if you see at the vegetarian, it's going exponential. Vegetarian.
I agree.
You see the shelf in the supermarket. At least here in the Netherlands, it is every 2 months there is 20 centimeters growing on the shelf.
But I'm a farmer's son. I grew up on a farm. And an animal, the production animal, the cow to give milk, and the pig to give meat, and the chicken to give an egg. This was very normal. I then separated from the farm. I'm still very familiar with it, but I must admit, the more that I go away from it, the more I also believe, and certainly when I come in the Netherlands, that what I call the production animal, the animal which we use simply for production of clothing, production of food, ethically we get more and more problems. My children still, when we had an animal and it was slaughtered for meat, it was a festivity. This was a great moment. We would have fresh, good tasting meat. If you now go, and if they ever on television show pictures of a slaughterhouse, it's horror. So our mentality has changed against the production animal. And that's why I also believe that our single cell protein has a bright future. There is the fact that we must educate, and I say it once again.
Willy, but you're also using your bacteria as a production. So instead of a cow, you're now using your bacteria.
Wait a second. Mark and me have used the word microflora. They are plants.
Yeah, we still have to kill. You still have to kill them.
Yes, of course.
But I have to reap the harvest. If I don't cut the wheat in the field, I don't have grain, right?
We have to eat something, Alexander. Come on.
I have to eat something, and I call them. No, this is Alexander. You touch an element. We have been gradually evolving to see bacteria as little beasts, little animals.
Yeah.
Right? While if you look, and Mark can double check this, they were never considered animals. They were plants. They were in the department of plant science. We talked about the microflora. And you can look in Delft, they were not in the biologists and the zoologists. You had divisions of plant science and you had divisions of animal science. They were always with plants.
Yeah, but now we have bacteria, fungi, algae, plants, and animals.
Okay, but I consider them with a lower type, ethically of, you have to eat something.
But Willy, they also kill each other.
No, so that's true, but plants also kill each other. There are plants which have been producing all kinds of products to stop the other. No, we cannot. What I'm trying to say is, it's a lower form of life, and to the best of our knowledge, we do not impose a tremendous amount of suffering on them. We let them grow, and then we stop them to grow. We harvest them, we pasteurize them, and they are good food.
And I think this is a good end for this podcast, Willy. I am still like, we need to do another one with you, Willy, and somewhere next year. And to be honest, the reflections you give from a more systemic point of view, so it's a little bit higher macro level on biotechnology, is really enriching for the podcast series we're running. So I'm really honored and happy you were willing to do that.
Great to hear your vision on this topic, Willy. It was fantastic.
Very good.
And Mark, you need to run?
Yeah, I need to go. Thank you all.
Very good. Mark, maybe sooner or later we meet again, and always welcome.
Yeah, thank you. We will. Keep into contact.
For those who is in here, we still have Rafael. Do you want to ask some questions to Willy? You can do it through the chat. That is not a problem. Otherwise, we're gonna close the session.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Master Beautiful Achievements podcast. A special thanks to our sponsors Scope Matters and Orvion for making this series possible. If you like our podcast, subscribe in your favorite podcast app. And if you want to know more, do check out the mastersofbeautifulachievements.com website. If you like this podcast, do not forget to leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Thank you for listening and join us next time.